a puzzle, a mystery. All of these things are problems, right? So if you find yourself in any of these areas, part of what we're going to be discussing today is how do we find solutions? How do we solve problems? How do we adequately solve problems? All right. Now, in the chat box again, can someone just tell me different, if you were to categorize problems, what are the different types of problems that you can face? Different types of problems. So remember what we talked about before. We said, what is a problem? Now, what are the different types of problems? One word. Okay, just maybe it's not one word, but just tell me, what are the different types of problems? I want you to use the chat box, because part of the things that I want you to understand is that, number one, you're already smart people. So before I even show you the presentation, you recognize that you already have an understanding. When you know that you have an understanding to something, it makes it easier for you. Okay, so very good. So there are financial problems. Let me go from the beginning to look at the analytical problems. All right. Someone says that there are physical and spiritual problems. Okay, there are emotional problems, there are financial problems, there are mental problems, there are personal problems, there are complex problems, financial, official, psychological, analytical, economic problems. All right, there are family problems, financial problems, societal problems, simple problems. John says there are chaotic problems. All right, there are emotional problems. Okay. Great. So the one thing we recognize is that there are different types of problems. We understand that there are various types of problems, right? So we know what a problem is, and I want you to walk with me here. We know what a problem is. Now we're trying to understand what are the different types. What are the different types of problems, right? Okay, so the different types of problems that we have. So number one, we already mentioned it, we have personal problems. So there are certain problems that are just personal to us. We don't even tell anybody about it. So there can be personal problems, right? Someone mentioned there can be spiritual problems, all right? There can be financial problems. It's like you people already saw my slides, but I know you haven't seen it. I'm just using it to encourage you, right? Remember the video that we watched yesterday? You are smart. You are smart. So don't let anybody tell you that you are not brilliant, right? You are smart. So types of problems, you already mentioned personal problems. There are spiritual problems. There are financial problems. There are family problems. There are workplace problems, and etc. You have listed the rest of them in the chat box. So there are various types of problems. There are varying types of problems, right? And we have listed out all of these problems. Now that we understand what a problem is, and we know that there are different types of problems, now let us begin to move into understanding how we begin to think about problems, Now, I want someone to come off of mute. As a matter of fact, I want three people, and then people that haven't raised their hands before. All right, Olasukomi is one. I want two more people to raise their hands. Two more people. Let's see. Who else is raising their hand? I want two more people. All right, I have James Afolabi and I have Damilola Oladejo. Great. All right, so the very first person, I want Olasukomi. I want you to read this quote. So you're going to read this quote to us and tell me what you understand from this quote. I want you to read this quote and tell me what you understand from this quote. Go ahead, Olasukomi.
Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
An Albert Einstein quote. Albert Einstein is quoted as saying that if he had an hour to save the world, he would spend 55 minutes defining the problem and only 5 minutes finding the solution. What I can simply say is that if he is able to understand the problem, then getting the solution is not an issue. But he needs to understand what the problem is before he can get a solution to it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for that. Thank you for that insight. All right, James, we've already read the quote. Just tell me what you understand from this quote. What does it mean to you? What do you understand from it? James Afolabi? Olasikomi, please, can you lower your hand? James, go ahead.
From Batesian codes, it means that the solution to the problem is not really the problem, but the understanding what the problem is itself.
Okay, so understanding what the problem is.
Can you hear me, please?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you.
Can you hear me, please?
Yes, we heard you. We heard you.
I say it again. Should I repeat it?
Yes, please repeat yourself. Please repeat yourself one more time, James.
Okay. According to Albert Einstein, he stated that the problem itself, the solution to the problem is not the real problem, but identifying the problem is actually the most important thing. So you spend more time understanding the problem. Once the problem is understood, then the solution, providing a solution to it, will not be a problem at all.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that insight, James. And then the last person I have, okay, Damilola Oladejo, please go ahead. Damilola?
Okay, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Okay, I think the quote is talking about Einstein quotes. What he's trying to say here is that since you can find the root and the causes to the problem, then finding the solution is not an issue at all. If you don't understand the problem, then you can't find solution to the problem. So you need to understand the problem and know the root to the problem. Then finding the solution is not an issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. Tomiwa, please go ahead. Let's hear as many contributions as possible. Tomiwa?
Hello, everyone.
Okay, good morning.
Hello, can you hear me, everyone?
Yes, we can.
All right, so from the quotes, my understanding is that what about Einstein is trying to say here is the better he understands the problem, the quicker and easier it will be to provide a solution. So it's just by spending 55 minutes in defining the problem, he's just trying to gain clarity. So the more he gets clarity, the better he's able to get clarity of the problem, the quicker and easier in real time is going to be able to provide a solution. Thank you.
Thank you for that. All right. Let me take final two people. Tunde Olobaye. I hope. All right. Go ahead, Tunde.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning, Tunde.
Yeah, from Albert Einstein quote, I think what he's trying to say is that, in other words, he's saying the problem shared is a problem solved. Said if we spend 55 minutes defining the problem, that means sharing out, making people aware of the problem, then the solution would be at hand. I think that's what he's trying to say there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then finally, Prince, last person, Prince. Can you share your thoughts, Prince?
Thank you very much. I think what about Estin is trying to say is that the key thing is discovering the problem. Once you discover the problem, then every other thing can follow.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have amazing stuff. I see some people are still raising their hands. We will not all of us, but we will get an opportunity to share, right? But we have gotten the gist of the matter here, right? Albert Einstein is saying, if he had 1 hour, imagine you have 1 hour, 60 minutes, if you had 60 minutes, 1 hour to save the world, he will spend 55 minutes defining the problem and only 5 minutes finding the solution. He will spend 55 minutes. That is, he's spending about 95% of the time defining the problem and only 5 minutes to find the solution. This is so important because a lot of times when we find ourselves in a difficult position or in a puzzle, remember that we talked about we defined the problem, right? It can be a puzzle, a mystery, an uncertainty. We want to go straight to a solution. You say, oh, what is the solution to this problem? But Albert Einstein is telling us here that we should pause and think, let me even understand. Someone used the word, what is the root cause of this problem? I must first define the problem. I must first define the problem. When I define my problem, finding a solution to it is no longer a problem. So if I use the example, and permit me to use the example about the spelling mistakes, So we can say that, oh, let me go to the solution. The solution is to install Grammarly. The solution is to have a dictionary close to me. Right? But have I spent enough time saying, what is actually the problem? Have I defined the spelling mistakes that I am making? By the time I begin to define the problem, it may be, and I'm just making some assumptions, it may be that I only make mistakes when I am under pressure. It may be that the only times where I make spelling mistakes is when I am in a hurry to type. So whether I have Grammarly or I have a dictionary is not the solution. Does that make sense? If that makes sense, just type it into the chat box. If that makes sense, just type it into the chat box. That's yes, type yes. Just type yes. So defining the problem is very critical. Defining the problem is very critical. Because you may be making those mistakes because I'm under pressure. But when I am writing without pressure, I don't make any mistakes. Do we understand that? So when I now define the problem, is it that I am under pressure? Is it that I am waiting to the last minute to type this document? That's why I'm making a mistake. If that is the case, then my solution is not a dictionary. Then my solution is not Grammarly. My solution is now, how do I make sure that at every time when I want to write, I have enough time. I am not under pressure. And if I do that, I will not make a mistake. Do we understand that? If I use the other example that was shared with us, so you may say, oh, they are not accepting what I am saying. Oh, they don't want to listen to me because I am a junior staff. So now my solution may be, okay, how do I make sure that they hear me? Sometimes it may just be the way that I have presented the solution. It may be the way that I spoke it to them. It may be the presentation of the solution. Because someone else may take that same solution and present it the right way or in a different manner, and it becomes accepted. Am I communicating with someone? I hope I'm clear. Am I communicating with someone? Are you understanding what I am saying? Remember that I cannot communicate, or I'm not communicating if you don't understand what I am saying, right? So it is so important to define the problem. When you find yourself in a difficult situation, the first thing is not to begin to find a solution. The first thing is to say, what problem am I actually facing? When I define that problem, then finding a solution to the problem I now understand. Is that clear? Finding a solution to a problem I now understand becomes easy. And that is where the hard work becomes. Does that make sense? Okay, great job. Some words that for thoughts, what do we understand by these words? And you've already used them. So I'm just going to run through them very quickly. I'm going to run through them very quickly because you used all of them. And I will be giving you examples of how you use them. Action plan. Action plan. If you think about the people that talked about the school, right? You said, my action plan. You talked about how there's low turnout in a school. And then part of your action was, if people are not coming, let us understand why they are not coming. If it is extracurricular activities, then institute it, right? Does that make sense? Type in the chat box if it makes sense. You also talked about if they need a school bus, they should put it. So these are the action plans that you put in place. In finding a solution, I need an action plan to be able to identify these things and action. And we will talk about it a little bit more. Critical thinking. In identifying the main problem, you were thinking critically. In defining the problem, you had to use your critical thinking skills. You had to actually identify what the main problem was. You had to think critically, right? The other thing that you use, and we will talk about these things a little later as we continue, 5 whys. You had to ask yourself multiple questions. Why is this the problem? Why do you think this is the problem? Why do you think this is the problem? Why do you think this is the problem? And just remind me, someone should just remind me of the 5 whys. Remind me of the 5 whys when we do our final 10-minute session. And I will demonstrate with one person. So I will ask for a volunteer and I will demonstrate with one person how to critically use the 5 whys to answer questions. All right? Prioritization. Prioritization, we also discussed this. What is the first thing that I need to do? I need to prioritize, right? We will talk about this finally, and then taking initiative. This is so critical in problem solving. Taking initiative. I have to be able to take initiative. All right? We have to be able to take initiative, and it's part of what you just exercised. So when you were taking initiative, you were thinking. Someone mentioned that if it happens, go to HR. That's taking initiative. Someone mentioned that if it happens, speak to the person. That's taking initiative. All right? So critical. All right? And then finally, decision making. These are just some words that are critical when we're solving problems. These are just some words that are so critical. I hope everyone can hear me. That are so critical when we're solving problems. So these words, every time you want to become, someone said they want to become an excellent problem solver. You need to take these words and understand them, because that's what will help you become an excellent problem solver. You will have an action plan. You will think critically. You will use 5 whys. You will prioritize. You will take initiative, and you will finally make decisions. Now, finally, what we want to talk about are some problem-solving steps. We want to talk about some steps to problem solving. All right. Remember the journey we're coming from. We have identified different types of problems, right? We have understood what a problem is. We have identified the different types of problems. We have learned a technique of solving problems from Albert Einstein. We have discussed amongst ourselves. Now, I want to give you a breakdown of how to solve problems. And interestingly, this has already been talked about, but I will just explain it more. That's why you people have helped me do my job better. I hope you realize the effectiveness of teamwork. The moment they say two heads are better than one, you bring your heads together and you think, or rather they say two good heads are better than one, and you think about these things together and you see how you're amazing at it. So very first thing in problem solving steps, the first thing is to see. Remember our Albert Einstein quote. It says, if you have 1 hour to save the world, he will spend 55 minutes identifying the problem. The challenge a lot of us face is that we don't even identify, we don't see the problem we are facing, we already want a solution. So the first thing in our steps to problem solving is to see. To see means to identify. You know how sometimes we talk about our inner eye. What is the problem I am actually going through? If I am going late to work, as an example, if my problem, if the challenge I'm facing is lateness to work, what is the main issue I'm facing? So the group that used that example says, is it traffic? Is it the fact that I am waking up late? Is it the fact that I live too far away from my job? So we have to see what is the main problem, because everything that we see on the surface, someone else used this at the beginning of the session. What is the root cause? Root cause. So when you see a tree, you see all of the fruits, right? So you see all of the fruits, but the fruit is not the main thing, it's the root. Because if there are no roots, there are no fruits, right? So when we see the lateness, we say, I'm late. And we think that lateness is the problem. No, lateness may not be the problem. That is just the fruit that is showing. So we need to go to the root and identify what is the cause of this fruit that I am seeing. Do we understand that? So we have to go to the root. So we have to see what the problem is. And by see, we have to identify what the main problem is. Is that clear? Is that clear? Put in the chat box. If it is clear, put in the chat box, yes. If it is clear. If the explanation is clear, just put it in the chat box so that I know. Okay, James is raising his hand. Let me quickly take that. James, go ahead. All right, James, are you raising your hand? You have a question? Please go ahead with your question. Okay, so, all right. So the first thing we must do is to see, and thank you for your responses. At least you are communicating with me that I am communicating with you, right? You are communicating that I am communicating with you. So great job. Now, once we see the problem, once we identify that there is a problem, the next thing we need to do is to understand that problem that we have identified. So now that I see is now to understand. This is where I begin to use my critical thinking skills to see to understand. So I have now identified, I am going late to work. I have seen now the problem is I'm now saying, okay, I now want to understand. I now want to understand what exactly is the issue. I will now understand. I will critically analyze what is the problem so that I can understand what the main problem is. Are we together? So that we can understand what the main problem is. Now, the next thing, once we understand the problem, is now time to solve the problem that we have understood. The moment we now understand, it's now time for solution. So remember, our first step is not to find the solution. Our first step is not to find the solution. Our first step is to see the problem, to understand the problem we have identified. Now, when we understand that problem we have identified, now we can now solve the problem that we have understood. And then the final thing is we have to evaluate. But what we are evaluating is we are evaluating the solution to the problem. We are evaluating the solution. We are not evaluating the problem, we are evaluating the solution. Because if we evaluate the solution, then we are able to identify if the solution solved the problem that we identified. I hope that is clear. Type in the chat box if it is clear. Type in the chat box if it is clear. Just with a yes, 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 with a clear, either with a yes or with a clear. Great. Now, while I was saying that it had already been explained, if you remember, Tomiwa told us one of the acronyms that they used. He says there was an acronym, a 4-step acronym. They said the first thing is to go, right? So they said the first thing is to go. Just take the first step, the problem solving. You have to go, you have to get up. It's the same thing. He says the next thing is to see, right? We've talked about it here, is to see. When you get up and you start going, you now begin to see what the problem is. He says the next thing is to think. Remember, I used the word critical thinking, is to think. And then the final thing is to do. That's where you solve. That's where you solve, right? Now, the additional thing is to evaluate. Because you must always, you have to make sure that the problem you identified has been solved. If you don't evaluate, then you don't know. If you don't evaluate, then you do not know whether you have solved the problem. So for the person that is going late, when you now start waking up 1 hour before earlier, after you have done that for 1 week, you now go back and say, I now need to go and evaluate this solution. Is waking up, has it solved my problem? Because waking up may have not solved the problem, but you may now recognize that when I wake up 1 hour earlier, I get to work early. So you must evaluate the solution that you have implemented. And these are the steps to solving problems. When you do this, you will become an excellent. Find the main problem. No problem that you're seeing physically, but when you go down, and the problem that you're seeing may be the problem that you're facing, but you must go back and identify what is the root cause of this problem. After you do that, you will understand the problem. Once you understand the problem you have identified, then you will solve that problem you have identified, the problem you have understood, and then you will evaluate the solution. I hope this is clear. And these are the steps to solving problems. Now, the first thing, we have talked about it, so I'm just going to go through this very, maybe faster than, but if you have any questions, just let me know. So over here, we're just going to talk about very briefly, see the problem, right? So I've already talked about this. It says you cannot work on something if you don't know what it is. All right? So that's why you must see the problem. You cannot work on something if you don't know what it is. So critical. We talked about it when you see the problem, right? It says resist the tendency to start working on a problem as soon as you know what exists. Develop an understanding of the problem. We have talked about this. All right? Now, let me just spend some time talking about 5 whys. 5 whys. I need one volunteer. One volunteer. Let me explain the 5 whys. One volunteer, just raise your hand. Just raise your hand. I need one volunteer. I need the volunteer to raise their hand. Someone that has not spoken before. Tomiwa, put your hand down. I'm not going to call you. You have spoken. Olasukomi, you can put your hand down. I'm not going to call you. You have spoken. Someone else. Kazim, I feel like you have spoken already. Haven't you spoken today? All right. Kazim, I feel like you have spoken. Just confirm to me that you have spoken today. Yes or no? No? Okay. All right. So can you turn on your video and come off mute so that we can see you? And I will tell you what I need you to do so that we can explain the 5 whys. Can you turn on your video and so that I can see you? All right. And okay, you spoke yesterday. It's yesterday. I remember that you spoke. All right. So now I'm going to ask you a question and I will continue to ask you why. All right. So can you hear me? Confirm you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, sir.
Okay, great job. So I want you to tell me, remember the problem you identified before, right? When we started class. Did you join us from the beginning of class?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so what was the problem that you identified as your problem?
In our group, it was sexual harassment.
No. Your own personal problem. Remember from the beginning of class.
Okay. You said, is it listening to work?
Yes.
Okay. Negligence of co-workers.
No. And also, okay, all right. So the problem you identified is negligence of co-workers.
Yes.
Okay. So why do you think your co-workers are negligent?
Okay. Because sometimes when we are given some tasks, the way they handle things with levity and doing as if because they are not the owner of the company or the organization, so they act slowly complete the task.
Okay.
I want to complete it.
Okay, that's fine. I hope we are all following me. So you said that your co-workers act negligent because they are negligent because they are not the owner of the business, right? So why do you think that they act like they are not the owner of the business? Why?
Because at the end of the month, their salary will still be complete.
Okay, so they act like they are the owner of the business because at the end of the month, their salary will still be complete.
Yes.
Okay, so why do you think that your co-workers are only focused on the money that they will get at the end of the month?
Because we all have different aim of acquiring a job. Some have passion for the work, while some are doing the work based on money only.
Okay, so why do you think that some people only focus on the money and not the other passions and what they will learn on the job?
Sometimes it might be the area they find themselves. Probably that's not the way they want. Probably that's not
no, you. What do you think? Not them. You. I'm asking you. So why do you think?
Why do you think that they are doing it because of
the money and not what they would learn? So why do you think?
I think that's because they don't think big.
They don't think big. Why do you think that they do not think big?
probably they don't think they can
No, not
have their own
probably.
organization.
Not probably.
Okay, I think
Uh-huh.
I think that they don't know if they will have chances of having their own organization and people are going to work for them as well.
Okay, my final question. Why do you think that people don't think that they can own their own organization? Why? What? Not some people, but why do you think so?
Um, I think they don't have the right understanding.
You don't think they have the right understanding? Okay, thank you very much. How do you say your name so that I don't say it wrong? How do you say your name?
Oluwaremile.
All right, thank you very much. So I hope from this exercise you have seen how, remember where I started from. She said that people are nonchalant in their work, right? So she says that people just come into the work and they just do anything that they like. And by the time I asked them 5 whys, I just kept asking why and why and why. We now got to the place why the problem why they may be acting that way is because they don't think that they will own their own businesses. Do we understand that? Is that clear to us? Just put in the chat box so that I can make sure it is clear. Is that clear? So by seeing the problem, so I could have said that, oh, these people don't care about the business. They are acting like the business is not their own. And I will start solving that problem. Oh, okay, how do I make them want to act like this business belongs to them? Whereas the main problem may be something else. So when I continue to ask why do you think this? 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 We continue to break down. It's like, it's like digging the soil, right? You remove the first layer, you remove the second layer. Every time you ask why, you're peeling back the onion. It's like you want to get to the middle of an onion. So every time I ask why, I will peel back one layer. Every time I ask why, I peel back another layer. Every time I ask why, I peel back another layer. Because I'm trying to get to the root. I'm trying to get to the root. So, I don't want to pass judgments that they don't care. Part of the thing is some people are just working for the money. I don't just pay me my salary. I will continue to peel back until I find the root cause of the problem. I hope that is clear. And from our chat, I see that is clear. And that is how we use the 5 whys. Do you understand what I'm saying? Remember, at that point, I had to use my generous listening skills. I had to listen to even some of the things that she was saying that she was not saying, so that I could ask the right questions. Remember, Efe told us yesterday that the quality of our answers, the quality of the answers we get is based on the kind of questions we're asking. The quality of the responses we get is based on the questions we are asking. So if I just say, why do you think this or why do you think that, then I may not have gotten to the root. Remember, everything that we're learning, I'm emphasizing it, everything that we're learning is connected. So now I have learned communication and generous listening. I'm supposed to take it even as I ask questions. We are now seeing that the asking questions is a critical element, of solving problems. So I hope that we're connecting every single thing, so that by the time we come out of this training, we are rock stars. We are rock stars. I hope it's clear, and I hope we're having fun. And the problem is, what is the cause of the problem? What is the cause? What is the cause of the problem? Right? Another thing is, so we just did it, understanding the root cause. So we did the 5 whys, right? Understand the root cause. What is the cause? Some of the other things I can do is the why, when, what, who, how. All right. In understanding the problem, I can say, who is experiencing this problem? Who is experiencing the problem? Where/when is it happening? All right. It helps me to understand the problem. Who might be affected by the problem? Who might be affected by the problem? Okay. What might be part of the solution? All of these things just help me to understand the problem. All of these things just help me to adequately understand the problem. All right? Who is experiencing the problem? If I'm going late to work, who is experiencing the problem? Where/when is it happening? At what point is this problem happening? Maybe when I leave my house it's free, but when I get to third mainland, there's traffic. Who might be affected? If I go late and they are deducting my money for coming late, who is affected by my lateness? Or maybe when I go to work, sometimes there are already customers waiting outside. Who is affected by my lateness? Part of the things I also now need to ask myself is what be part of the solution. So I need to begin to think about possible solutions. Then finally, the next thing we want to talk about is solving the problem, and we talk about prioritization. Prioritization is just a big fancy word that just means first things first, last things last. That's all. That's essentially what it means. The first things first, last things last. So when I prioritize, you make a list of things that you want to do. And then the most important things, you do them first. The urgent things, you do them first. All right? You determine priority level. You go through them as you're solving this problem. How important is this thing? How important is it from the list of tasks that you have made? All right? How urgent it is. So you divide, and we will talk about the urgent and important. All right? And then organize your time and create a plan of action. Remember that when we were talking, I said there are some keywords. I showed you some keywords to solve problems. And we talked about prioritization. We talked about plan of action. So don't feel like I am rushing through this because we've already talked about it. Our group exercises, our team, that's what had us to do the breakout room. And even though it took more time, it was great because it showed you. I believe that the more you practice something, the more you talk about it, the better you get. So that's why, if you notice, a lot of these things, you have already talked about them by the time you went into your breakout, which was why I was encouraging us to participate. All right, so you did some prioritization. You identified what's the first thing. I think the example that comes to my mind is the school. All right, you say, what's the first thing that we're going to do? What's the next step? If this step doesn't work, what's the next one? What's our plan of action? Okay, so there's something called a prioritization matrix. Don't worry, you don't need to write this down. Remember, we're going to share this presentation with you. It will include this prioritization matrix. So there are 4 boxes. If you see that there are 4 boxes, you can see one of the boxes that says urgent and important is box 1, quadrants, 4 boxes. You can see the not urgent but important is in box 2. Not important but urgent is in box 3. And not urgent and not important is in box 4. Then the things that are not urgent and not important may just be the fact that, okay, maybe for now, for these few days, I will leave Twitter alone. I will leave Instagram alone because they are draining my battery. I will leave Big Brother alone if I'm watching it on my phone because it's draining my battery. So that by 9 a.m. and by 2 p.m., I have battery for class. And that's how you prioritize. The problem is no battery. How do I prioritize? Then, of course, is an example. I also understand that we may not have power. And EKDP and Ikeja Electric chose not to give us power. So regardless of how much we prioritize, we can't do anything, right? But we think about various ways to solve this problem. I hope that is clear. And then really that's what I just talked about here, right? How do I create an action plan? Right? What are the different things that I need to do? How do I create an action plan? All right? Plan should always have a sequence timeline. Remember I say you do the first things first. What's the first thing I'm going to do? What's the second thing I'm going to do? When will you start? Okay? So you must have dates. You must have what's the first thing. There must be a sequence. Sequence is just like a clock. You go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. All right. So that's sequence. When you're creating a plan, what's the first thing? What's the second thing? What's the third thing? All right. What should you prepare to do? Be prepared to be flexible. You know, your plan can change. We can create the best plan, but there's something called agile project management. I have created a plan, but I must be willing to change. So something may happen that may make, if you think about our matrix, something may happen that was in the important but not urgent, that we now have to move to urgent and important. I have to be flexible enough to move those things. I cannot say, oh no, I'm not going to move. I have to be flexible to move. Do we understand that? I hope that is clear. All right, and this is just an example of, and you can create your own. Please, can you keep your mic on mute? This is just an action plan. So you have your various actions, you have who is responsible, you see where you have your priority over here, and then you see like your status, whether it has been completed, your start date and end date, and then you have some notes. All right, so this is just an example. Remember, I will share this presentation with you so you can look at it and say, how do I even create my own action plan? And remember, we talked about there are various kinds of problems. So you can create action plans for various aspects of your life, Then the final thing we talked about is to evaluate the solution. We must learn how to we are evaluating solutions. That is one thing. We cannot just say, I've solved the problem. Did the solution work? Did the solution work? So critical. Did the solution work? If I don't evaluate the solution, I don't know whether it worked. So check if the solution was applied accurately. Some solutions can be evaluated immediately, others may take longer time. So there are certain solutions that you provide now, you don't know whether they will work until later. Do you understand? So we must evaluate those solutions. All right? Okay, so we must evaluate those solutions. Okay, all right, at this point, we have come, the group work we will continue in our WhatsApp group. We'll have some exercises to do when we get